Hi, my name's Danny Fleming,
and I'm Marcus Collins from MA Properties with the 2020 Lexington Market Review. I don't know why I looked at the title. I know what we're going to talk about. So, with the 2020 Market Review.
Anyway, so why do we do this? Well, we want to give you all of the information that's out there so that you can make smart moves, because our tagline is smart moves made here. But really, I mean, that's sort of a bit glib, really, because it's easy to get information and data today. It's easy, but it's a lot harder to make sense of it and use it to your advantage. And this is one of the reasons why, you've probably seen the market review booklets that we put out every January. I know we're going to talk about it.
No, I didn't bring it down. You told me that I should bring it down. I forgot.
Anyway, so it's great having the data, but it's the analysis behind it that makes the most sense and is the most valuable, which is why we thought we would live stream an analysis of the 2020 market review, and this is why we take the time to explain. We're serious about learning every data point and detail, and why we study our markets so obsessively.
I have lots of notes.
And Marcus will be doing a lot of the talking, but
initially,
I'll be interrupting as well.
No, you do as much as me.
No. So anyway, our agenda tonight, we're going to cover single families first, then the luxury market, then new construction, condominiums. We're going to give a bit of a summary. Then we thought it useful to show you how you can find info on other towns, because sure, this one's about Lexington, but you might be thinking of buying in another town, or maybe you've got another home in another town. So how do you get this same sort of information about that other town? And so we're going to show you how to do that. And then we'll go into the predictions of what we think is going to happen in 2021. We're going to make predictions.
We are. Even though it's January the 20th, we're going to make predictions.
And you had to look at your watch to see it's January the 20th. We have a new president today. That happens January the 20th.
Okay, there you go.
Okay. Anyway.
I knew we had a new president because that was in the predictions, but anyway.
Anyway, this is the 2020 Market Review booklet. This is the old version. This is the one that you would have gotten in 2019 if you live in Lexington. We mail them to every household. I do need to get you to keep a lookout, because I don't know if you've noticed, we've changed our color scheme and our logos and all of this sort of stuff. So the new one's going to have, the new one's probably going to have mint and the pop blue. Yeah.
See, you're so topical, dear. Me, unfortunately, I'm not. I've got my old shirt on here.
So keep a lookout for that. Because,
and we've no idea what the new cover's going to be.
Yeah,
we're still trying to decide what our new cover scheme's going to be.
So that's why we put the
we'll
old
decide that
one
this
there.
Week.
Okay, so anyway, let's get into the masterclass.
Go for it. So first of all, we're going to look at single-family homes. If you've heard, some of these drafts will be familiar. If you've ever listened to us talk about the market before, say they will be familiar. And we will, even though we're going to talk a lot about 2020, clearly it was a big year. In many of them, we're going to give you a little bit of historic perspective too, because it's important to explain quite what happened in 2020.
The trends and things like that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So first off is the inventory level. So what this is a snapshot of how many homes, and in fact it's all homes, that are available to buy on the first of the month. The absolute value doesn't really make any difference. What matters is the trends you can see. And there's a couple of trends to note here, and I tried to do this with them. I don't know if people can see with a mouse, but I'll give you the years anyway. 11 and 12, high inventory levels, because now we're coming out of the downturn in 2009. 2009, the inventory levels went skyrocketing. Buyers were not coming into the market. A lot of sellers trying to sell weren't able to sell because the buyers weren't in the market. And it was almost like a light switch went on in 2013, because the buyers put the recession, the downturn behind them, and they came into the market en masse. And you can see it very much in this data.
The buyer confidence increased.
Right.
Very definitely the buyer confidence increased.
Not just in Lexington. Interestingly, if I talk a little bit about Arlington, the next town down, it saw that upturn or the reduction in inventory, the upturn in buyer confidence 12 months earlier in 2012. The rest of the market, 2013, the further out you go towards 495 or 495, so that was delayed somewhat. But in Lexington and the surrounding towns, 2013 was the big year. And that low inventory levels continued. In fact, they reduced even further in 17 and 18. More on that in a minute.
And we should say that often when people look at this inventory level graph, they think, oh, well, that's supply that decreased in 2013 and 2014. That's supply that's decreased. That's nothing else. It's just there weren't as many homes available for sale. But if you look at the next graph, you'll see that we actually sold more homes in those years. And so it wasn't a lack of supply, it was increased buyer demand.
So lower inventory in 17 and 18. Actually, lower supply too in 17
yes,
and 18.
in those years,
right?
Definitely.
But here's the important piece. 2019, as you can see, we got higher inventory. What's happening here in 2019 was, if you remember back the kind of dark old days, the good old days of 19, there was lots of discussion around an economic correction. When was it going to come? And even though we didn't necessarily see it in 19, it came in early 2020, that perception was enough to force sellers to bring, or not force is the wrong word, but
convince sellers.
Convince sellers to bring their home on the market in 2019. The challenge was the buyer demand was relatively static, and so those homes didn't sell. So
that's the same thing, that as sellers wanted to come on the market thinking that there was going to be a downturn in the market. Well, the same thing, the buyers were hearing exactly the same news, so they were more reluctant to pay crazy prices. They were a little bit sort of, I don't know that we should buy at the moment, so that minimized their demand.
And that's what pushed up the inventory levels in 2019. 2020 came along, and I guess we should go to the next slide because there's a lot going on in 2020. So the next slide shows, or next graph shows us home sales in Lexington. Blue is existing homes, single family I should say here. Blue is existing homes, green is new construction homes, and then the orange color is the off-market teardowns. I'll put those in for our discussion around new construction. So what you can see is in 2015, we reached a peak in home sales. Then it began to decline. And what's happening in 15 all the way through to 18 is that many sellers were thinking price appreciation is good. Sure, taxes are quite high in Lexington, but I think I'm going to stay in the town, not move on, not downsize, if you will, just because I want the price appreciation that we're seeing in the town. And so the supply, therefore the home sales, throughout this period, 15 through 18, we had essentially static buyer demand. So the sales declined because the number of listings declined.
Well, it was also too that sellers were in 2015 to 2018, sellers who wanted to move and wanted to downsize potentially or upsize, they were struggling, actually no, it's the downsizing, they were struggling to buy the more affordable homes because of all of the buyer demand that was out there for those smaller homes. So,
right, so there's two effects kicking in.
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting about 2019 is we had 21% actually, percent more listings in 19 than we did in 18. But as you can see, the number of home sales was basically static. And that's why you saw in the previous graph the inventory levels increasing. More listings coming on, static by a number of buyers in the market, and therefore inventory increased. Now, fast forward to 2020, as you can see, the number of home sales rose dramatically, about 25% in fact. So what's happening here is buyer demand increased, and guess what? There was already supply in the market, or at least if it wasn't in the market, it came on the market. So there's two things kicked in, a desire for more sellers to sell their home, a desire for more buyers to buy in the town. Lo and behold, that's what gave us an increase of about 25% in terms of the number of sales. So that's what you see here. this is not quite unique. Other towns did see an increase in the number of sales, but in terms of the percentage increase, it's very high in comparison to other towns. Yeah. So that's what you need, that kind of historical idea of, okay, we had declining sales because sellers didn't want to sell. Yeah. 2019, yes, they did want to sell, but they couldn't because the buyers weren't in the market. 2020 came in, and lo and behold, sellers wanted to sell, buyers wanted to buy. And so, as you can see there, the number of home sales rose by about 25%, just over 25%. So that's what's happening in terms of 2020. So, clearly a pretty good picture.
And it probably makes sense, unless you want to talk about it a little later, as to why there was such a large increase in buyer demand.
Go for it.
Oh, well.
Don't ask me if I want to answer the question. No, go for it, Danny. Go for it.
Well, well, part of the thing is that you have a lot of folks, because of COVID, there's a lot of folks living in the centre of Boston, in your more urban environments like your Cambridge, your Somerville, those types of areas, that they're stepping on each other's feet. They want to get out. They want to get into a larger home. And they needed space because possibly one or two of the adults in the household were working from home. More than likely, there were kids also remote schooling. And if the house wasn't quite big enough, they needed to move into a bigger home. So there was a far increased buyer demand. Lots more buyers in the marketplace looking to buy. And it's been a very, very buoyant market from about July onwards. I'm just looking to see what the data will show.
Be patient on that.
Okay, be patient on that.
Yes, you're right. Late May,
Yeah.
early June is when it kind of.
And July, yep. July onwards. Our seasonality didn't apply. I don't want to steal your thunder. Keep going.
No, otherwise we'll have nothing to say in the following slides. We will. Don't worry about it. We'll have plenty to say in the following slides. All right, so moving on. So that's kind of the big picture. There's the kind of, whoa, what happened? And that's what happened in the market in Lexington. Back to what Danny was saying, this is why we've also seen some other towns, for example, if you go further out, where you can buy more house for your money, out by $495, for example, we did see increasing sales in those towns too, because people looking to go for that slightly larger home. Days on the market. Even though we had lots of buyer demand, days on the market remained relatively static. And it makes sense to kind of differentiate, and you'll see this in the sell price list price ratio in a minute as well, differentiate different price points. Because, as I'll explain in a moment, we had a shift in distribution too, with more expensive homes coming on the market, and they in general tend to stay on the market longer. So even though the average was 41, if you back out the more expensive homes and you look at below 1.5 million, that number was closer to 25 days, which is a relatively low number. So it's actually a much more buoyant picture than this would actually show if you were looking at the below 1.5 million homes versus the whole market, which is what this is here. And
we have to say we had a real estate market that was in upheaval up until about May. We had a couple of months in the very beginning of the year, but typically there was a whole lot of uncertainty as to what was going on, and we were,
we see the same thing with the sale price to list price ratio. It mimics really, they're great metrics to look at the strength of a market. Here in Lexington, we're at about 100%. Arlington dominated very much by first-time home buyers, not as much supply, a relatively static supply. We see this ratio upwards of 102, 103%. But still, it kind of mimics what we see in the average days on the market. If you look at the lower price points, so that ratio raises slightly, in fact, over 101%, as we'll see in a minute. So it's kind of there's two parts to the market, below 1.5 and really above 1.5. So average sale price, actually 8% higher than previous years. Hold that thought though.
Yeah.
Median price up around 12.5%. But let's kind of put a caveat to these numbers. If you look closely at these numbers, we've got something strange going on. In fact, the rate of change of the average, of the median, was much higher than the average. So what's happening here is that the data is beginning to skew. It's always been skewed. That is, we have more expensive homes coming on the market. The number of more expensive homes, luxury, we'll talk about that in a minute, is increasing, and therefore that's skewing, if you will, both the average and the median. It skewed the median quite a lot. It didn't skew the average quite as much because we had more under that 1.5 million come on the market. So it kind of kept the average, not moving quite as much. So a little bit technical in terms of what's going on, but essentially what you're seeing here is not real appreciation. It just isn't. Lexington's prices, if in your home, if you will, has not increased by 8 or 12%, much closer to about 5%. So the real price appreciation, I'll explain a little bit how we kind of put a sanity check to that, round about 5% this year. Higher than we've seen, lower than we've seen in previous years. You can see if I go back to the average, that's about 3%. So we did see a slight increase in that, but around 5 is what I would say for the real price appreciation in the town.
Still great for a complete upheaval in the town. And when you look at this graph that's on there, and you look at 2017 and 2018, really the average sale price didn't move much at all.
About 2% in those years, I think it was. Yeah,
and 2019, it looks like it increased, but the median increased as well. So we've had that same effect in 2019 and 2020, but especially with 2020 being such a tumultuous year, to have a 5% real true appreciation is amazing.
So there's the median price. So the graph that Danny was alluding to earlier that kind of does begin to show the effect of COVID kicking in the market is this one. So let me explain what it is first, but then I'll explain what it looks like, or why it looks the way it does. This is cumulative sales. So what I'm tracking here is homes that were listed in 2020 and went under agreement. Not selling, because there's about a 6-week delay between you under agreement and closing. But I look at, came on in 2020, went under agreement in 2020, and that's the data that I'm mapping for both 19, which is the pink color, and then 20, which is the blue color. So, as you can see here, in about that second half of March, give or take, the curve for 2020 begins to flatten. That's the effect of COVID. Essentially in mid-March, homes stopped coming on the market. People couldn't buy, or buyers couldn't buy. And that continued to about second week of May, give or take. And then, as you can see, the market took off, and it continued. That rapid rise, the gradient of that curve continued, and only really slowed down in the November timeframe. Normally, the market slows down much earlier than this. You can see a slowdown in 2019 over the summer months. There's the fall market, and then it begins to slow down once you get to Thanksgiving. But as you can see with the blue, which is 2020, it continued apace and really only began to flatten or slow down in that November, December timeframe. So that's what's going on with those.
Even to that, we bought a home on the market the last weekend before Thanksgiving, which we would never normally bring a home on the market that late in the season. But as we were saying before, the seasonality, everything was completely topsy-turvy in 2020. The buyers were out there. We bought this home on the market. And in coming on the market on the Thursday to reviewing offers at 9 a.m. on the Tuesday, we had 58 private showings of that home. So only one of those buyers could be successful. So even at that price point, by Thanksgiving, there was still a large number of buyers out there ready to buy, and they're still there now. We have some buyers agents, some agents that work in our team who were still writing offers all the way in December. In fact, we had one accepted offer, I think it was the 24th of December. So really, the buyers are out there, they're just waiting for homes to come on the market. Marcus.
I'm writing a note. I want to make sure we mention something later on.
I finished,
I know.
But actually,
I couldn't type fast enough. See, now you're going to keep talking so I can write some more notes.
I was just going to say, look at the number of the 2020 cumulative sales being 372 compared to 2019 being 304. That's a dramatic increase when you,
Right.
That's a dramatic increase.
And people are looking at the details. The reason that 372 differs from the home sales is because this is homes that went under agreement. First of all, were listed in 2020. So I don't want all the stragglers that kind of were on the market over the new year, but also homes that went under agreement. So this is going to be a higher number in general than you would get looking at home sales per se. But that's what that data is. And this is cumulative data for single family homes as well. A little look at the details. Fairly predictable. The higher the price point, the lower the sale price to list price ratio, the weaker the market. Not that many homes under 750. The reason it's so low is that there's a number of those homes that need some help, if that's the right way to put it. Came on a little bit too expensive, needed some help. That's why that ratio is low. But if looking at the bulk of the market, the higher the price point,
Well, you can
the
tell
lower the number.
You can tell the sweet spot is between 750k and 1.5 million. Both of those are around 102 sale price to list price ratio, which indicates that there's a lot of competition at those price points. But of course, you've got to price realistically, because there's also a lot of homes that come on in those price points that overprice, and they're the ones that sit on the market. The others get snapped up, and with competing offers, which is much more advantageous. If you can sell your home with competing offers, typically you're potentially getting higher than, once buyers sort of start getting involved in, I've got to have this home, I've got to have this home, I've got to have this home, they're going to pay more money for your home than they would have otherwise. But also their terms that they're writing in their offers are much more inviting. They're dropping the inspection contingency, so you can go straight to purchase and sale. And inspections, if you're interested in all of this sort of stuff about how risky inspections are, I've been spending my winter months doing selling essentials videos. You'll be able to find them on our website. And there's a whole series, I think there's probably 100 in there now, and of talking about different topics related to selling. And I talk about inspections, about how often a buyer will have an inspection contingency, because it's their opportunity, it's their get out of jail free card. It's their opportunity to change their mind. Sorry, I digress.
We have another presentation that will talk just about that, though, don't we?
Okay, yes, we do.
5 pillars. Anyway, that's our sellers masterclass. We have a whole. This is all about the numbers.
I digressed.
The other presentation is really about how to maximize your sale price, essentially, and one of those key things is, of course, lack of inspection, which drives competition. Anyway, so let me.
But you wanted to talk about a sanity check with you.
I do, because people. I've been asked before. So how do you come up with what the real appreciation rate is? So give me one way I look at it, and that's to look at the rate of change of the average living area per price band. It does give you a sanity check, if nothing else. It certainly shows you, if you look at the rate of change of that. It's a crude metric, but it's one way of trying to move the skew out of the data for averages and medians, is to look at that rate of change of living area, and that's where you get around about 5%. So it's a very crude measure, but it is a sanity check to ask the question, have we seen 12.5 or 8% increase in prices? And the answer to that question is no. And this is one way of looking at it. There's some others I look at as well, but that's one way of looking at it. So luxury. So first of all, we define the luxury market as anything over $2 million. Somewhat arbitrary, sorry about that. We had to pick a number. We picked 2 million. But we take a little look at this market. So roughly the same graphs that you saw previously, but now for all homes which were sold over $2 million. Here's the home sales. As you can see, in 2019 and 2020, sizable increase in the number of luxury sales. In fact, 60% in 2019, and then that was reduced slightly, he says, to 50% in 2020. Interestingly, if you look at Massachusetts, in aggregate, that the number of homes that sold over 2 million increased by about 36%. So back to what you were saying about this desire, wrong word, but this increased focus on a bigger home has meant that more luxury homes were sold, say not just in Lexington but in the whole Massachusetts area in 2020. And it's driven, I think, almost not exclusively, of course, but a lot of it driven by the fact that yes, I would like a larger home, please, essentially, and that's kind of renewed focus for people. So clearly, very buoyant market. That almost 50, well, not quite 50-50. It was 50-50 new construction, existing homes. The number of existing homes increased slightly.
There's where I was going to say. I mean, it's
right.
The difference between 2019 new constructions to 2020 new construction, not much of a difference. But when you look at the existing homes in 2019 and the existing homes in 2020, there's a lot of people that decided it's time to move.
Right, and back to what we were saying before about the market here is to some extent driven by the number of people who are willing to move out of the town, downsize essentially. Some of it in the town, of course, but at the top end, the bigger homes, not price, but the larger homes, we need people to downsize to allow people to kind of move up. And that's what you see in that jump from 22 to 38. Downsize is deciding that now's a good time to exit the market, exit the Lexington market, and move into a smaller home. So that's what you see there in the increase in the blue numbers. Days on the market, it's been decreasing, steadily as the luxury market has got stronger. We had slightly less days on the market. Remember, this is a larger number than we saw for the market in general, and certainly a much larger number, well over double what you would expect for the below 1.5 million. So it's weaker at these higher price points, unsurprisingly. But having said that, there still is a certain amount of strength. Days on the market. We see the same thing, of course, in the sale price to list price ratio. They really follow the same. The metrics show us the same thing, if you will. Breaking into pushing into the distribution a little bit. It's kind of interesting. We've got 2017 through 2020 here. Big difference you can see is in 2019 we only had 4 homes in the 2.5 to 3 million bracket. Fast forward to 2020, that increased 5-fold. Now we're at 20 homes in there. That's a big increase. We saw a big increase in the 3 million, but nowhere near what we saw in that 2.5 to 3. And I think this is the sweet spot, if you will. This also, I think, is the limit at which it's relatively straightforward to sell a home in this price point. It becomes much more difficult at the 3 million. Price tag, it's much more difficult there. We've seen this large increase. This kind of shows us that in that 2.5, or at least really in that 2 to 3, there really is a buoyant market. Once you get over $3 million, it becomes much more difficult. In fact, a large number, something like 70% of the homes that were listed over $3 million didn't sell. They just basically expired or cancelled off the market. So a lot of homes coming on over that $3 million, very few, 30% essentially, are actually selling in that price point. So that's kind of important to note. But I think the big difference here is that 2.5 to 3 million, big increase, about a 5-fold increase.
That's staggering. And that I believe that a lot of that is new construction, the 2.5 to 3.
Actually, if I can go back to this, I mean, some of it, most of it is. I mean, it has to be. Not all of it, though, given the the number of existing homes that sold. So it isn't the majority is new construction. Based on this same ratio, and it kind of followed through. It's at that same. What is it about? It's not 50-50, it's more like 60-40 probably in terms of existing homes. And it's the same in that 2 to 2.5 million too. We'll see more about that when we look at new construction in the next section. I'll actually have that data for you.
Oh, yeah, we will. I forgot we're doing new construction. Sorry.
You forgot.
I put it together. I should know what's in it because I put it together today.
So we'll see that data in a minute. And so, I mean, this is the same data you've seen before. It shows you that sale price, list price declines as prices get higher. and those average days on the market are considerably higher than the existing market.
Oh, yeah, and look, there's the new construction count.
Yep, number of
Yeah,
counts.
11 out of 20. Well,
Yep.
it's still, it's
Yeah.
just over 50%.
Yep.
Yep.
So new construction, let's kind of look at that one. Kind of interesting that we saw a decline in new construction from 2015 through 2018. Bear in mind we saw a decline in the number of homes listed and therefore sold in that same time period. So we shouldn't be too surprised by that decline, but that decline is much higher than the decline in sales in general. So new construction really took quite a hit. Some of it because the homes because there was less inventory in the market, buyers bought those homes, home buyers bought those homes, and essentially the builders got priced out of the market essentially. And if you look at the average sale price of an off-market teardown, bear in mind that almost all of these homes that you see here were built on the site of an existing home of a teardown, potentially not an off-market teardown. The builders just weren't able or weren't willing, perhaps the better way to put it, weren't willing to compete with the home buyers in that time period through 2018. If you look at the average price of a new construction, it's risen quite rapidly over the last few years. So builders are finding that they have to compete in order to essentially build homes in the town. This is the other reason why you've seen a slight shift into the higher price points too. They're having to pay more for a teardown, therefore have to sell it for a higher price. And so those two map each other in terms of the shape of it. So that's what's going on here. Essentially, the builders being forced to pay more money for the off-market teardowns.
And also, a lot of those off-market teardowns, or the homes that they would want to potentially tear down, those sellers have nowhere to go. And I know I was working with a whole lot, and they really didn't have that next step to go to, so they just weren't even thinking about selling to a builder or bringing it on the market because they had nowhere to go.
Right. Over that 18 to 2020 time period, teardown prices have increased by about 20%, which is clearly way outstripping the market. And that is the competition that's kicking in, both between developers, but between developers and home buyers too. So that's what's kind of happening in the market there. In terms of that sale price to list price ratio, it's quite low, as you can see. Only 96%. A lot, it's fair to say, of new construction homes come on the market and they're overpriced. It's interesting if you look at the number of homes over $2 million, existing homes versus new construction. In 2020, 30 homes had to reduce their price before they sold, right? Existing homes. That number increased to 50% when it came to the new construction. So new construction in general is coming on the market too expensive, and therefore that's why that ratio is too low. 50% of those came on the market actually had to do a price reduction before they actually sold. To say it's 30% when it came to existing homes. So poor pricing strategy by many of the developers is forcing that ratio down. Sale price distribution, dominated, you can see it's shifted this again, 17 through 2020, dominated somewhat by this rise here. It went from 4, so about a threefold rise in that price range that we were looking at previously. So a sizable increase in that 2.5 to 3. So a lot of what we saw in the luxury market, 2.5 to 3, is existing homes, because in general it went up 5-fold. New construction only went up 3-fold. So that was going on with the distribution. But that shift to a higher price point has been forced in some point because of the increased pressure on developers, a lot of buyers in the market, having to offer more for the teardowns and therefore having to build more expensive homes.
So we should explain how a builder determines what price to make an offer on as a teardown. Do you want to do that or will I?
You can do it. I've talked enough. Go for it. You know the name.
So the way a builder determines what price they want to pay for a teardown is a facet of how much do they believe they can sell that resultant new construction home for. If they believe, and they work on thirds from that price, it's a ballpark type of thing. If they think that they could sell that home for 2.1, then they're talking about an acquisition cost around $700,000. if they're talking in a neighborhood where they can, it could be a $3 million home that could be sold in that location, then their acquisition cost increases to about $1 million. So it's really to do with where the home is and what that final new construction home could sell for. So it depends on the size of the lot. It depends on the location. It depends on, is there wetlands? All of those types of things. How much could they sell that final home for governs approximately what they're willing to spend to acquire the land.
Yep.
Yep.
Just as the data for the different price ranges, again, you can see it just kind of follows what we've seen previously, where the higher the price, the lower the sell price to list price ratio.
Yeah, and look at how many homes, a new construction between 1 and 1.5. 2.
Yeah, and there's nothing. But by the way, there's nothing below $1 million now.
Yeah,
condominiums, yes, but not.
A few years back, you'd have a large number in that price point. Now, to be in that price point, or even up to about the 1.8, 1.9 million mark, you're talking about a new construction home that's on a busy street, or that those types of things that doesn't have great curb appeal. So really, the prime lots are the ones that are selling for much more.
Yep, you can see that here. If I go back, you can see that it's shifted 13 to 2 and up to 1.5, went from 13 to 2 over this time period. So we don't normally look at condominiums, but we thought we would. Just to see what was going on with the condo market.
Marcus pulled this information today, so I haven't seen it yet. So I'm going to be listen and see.
Oh, you're going to listen? Okay.
I'm going to listen and see whether you explain it well enough.
So we don't normally look at condos because there aren't that many, but I thought it would be useful to take a look because if I look at the home sales, there are existing, I don't know, that's
you can tell that Marcus added.
Yeah, I just copied the slides basically in Jen's graphs.
Because he's got that this is single family homes down the bottom, but that's okay. That's all right.
But you can change it. The reason I added it in is that you can see here, the green is the new construction, the blue is existing homes. There's a lot of existing condominiums. Pfeiffer Lane, Potter Pond, there's a lot of them. So I thought it would be useful to see what's happening with essentially the blue area, the existing homes. And so in a couple of areas, I've kind of backed out the new construction. Looking at the 18 through 20, roughly the same number of condominiums, existing home condominiums coming on the market. What you see there in terms of the green, you can almost pinpoint that to a condo development.
That was Grove Street.
Was 2020, probably summer 19.
Yeah.
14 was the one by Turning Mill. Robinson.
Yes, Robinson.
So you can almost pinpoint, that was this, that was that development, that was that
2015 was the one off Shade Street, maybe?
Could be. Yeah.
Anyway, doesn't matter.
Right, so sell price to list price ratio declining 2018 through 2020, which is kind of interesting. Okay, so we've got declining, the market is not feeling that strong in the condominium market. If you look at average sell price, it's been increasing though. But hold off. Remember what we said previously, there's some existing homes and some new construction. New construction is pushing that average sale price higher. So let's back out the new construction and see what's actually happening with existing condo sales. Average sale price of existing condos, excuse me. And as you can see, it rose until 18 and it's been declining 2 to 3% every year since then.
Now, what criteria did you use for existing condos? So built less than 2019?
It's a little more complex.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
It's existing condos.
Okay.
I can explain if you'd like, but no.
Do you want him to
no,
explain?
You don't. No, you don't.
Put a message out.
So what's more important, way more important than this, look at that average sale price for an existing condo in Lexington, $687. The average sale price for a condo in Arlington is $665. It's almost the same. And when you think about some of the large condo developments in Lexington, Potter Pond, Pfeiffer, I can't remember the other ones over there is called.
Drummer Boy,
thank you.
I think that's the same.
Yeah, it's the same development. many of those are large condominium developments with relatively high condo fees. And so compare that to, for example, a condo around about the same size in a two-family in Arlington, where the condo fee is much, much lower. And so you can see that given a choice between perhaps a condo with a $600 a month condo fee versus a similar sized condo at about the same price with $150 condo fee, monthly condo fee, you can see why the existing sale price in Lexington has been declining. They're just not as competitive as existing condominiums in other towns, where perhaps those condo fees, which you say could easily be $600 a month, which is a sizable, when you think about that in terms of a mortgage repayment, given the average price at $680. I think that's what's happening here.
Yeah.
Is that, given that choice, I'm shying away from the high condo fees here. I think I'm going to get a great school system in Arlington. I'm going to save an awful lot of money, and I pay about in condo fees and about the same price. So that's my kind of the big trend here is that it's really not as competitive, predominantly because almost all the condos in Lexington, not all of course, but almost all the condos.
There's a small percentage that are in two families.
Right, the majority are in existing developments, which therefore carry with them that large condo fee. And that's probably also upsetting the condos in two family too, because I'm not going to bother with Lexington. Every time I look at the condo fee, it's too high. I would prefer to look in, for example, Arlington, the next town down. So I think that's what's happening here. Lexington's essentially pricing itself out of the market. It's about the same price as Arlington, but those condo fees are the real sting in the tail, if you like. So that's my guess is what's happening there. So the average sale price is masked by the new construction, so this kind of backs it out, and that's what's going on with existing condos. Make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
It did.
All right, so what's next? Oh, I just the usual by price range, as you can see there. So, summary. So what's kind of going on in the wider market? So to explain a little about why we saw the average and the median begin to shift by quite a high percentage, you need to look at 19 versus 20 sales distribution, and that's what you see here. Again, blue is existing, green is new construction, and then the orange color is the off-market teardowns, which I put in there. Excuse me. As you can see, the off-market teardowns beginning to kind of move to a slightly higher price point. Less of them this year than we saw in previous years, but we saw a nice increase in the 1 to 1.5. But here's the big increase: 1.5 to 2. And then, as we talked a lot about the 2 to 2.5 price point, we saw a large increase in that one too. So kind of interesting to look at that. So we're seeing that kind of shift in distribution between the data you see here in 2019 and what you see here in 2020. The reason this one looks larger is that we had a lot more sales. The top of the graph's 130 here. Top of the graph's 100 here, so that's why the 2 to 2.5 looks slightly higher, but actually it's not. It looks low, but it's actually not. So that's the kind of the big shift. We saw more of these kind of mid-priced homes coming on, dragging the average back. We saw more of the higher-priced homes coming on, pushing that median out somewhat. So that's what's kind of going on there. In terms of what's happening in the wider world, what's interesting is to look at mortgage interest rates. And I put this in because I thought it's quite interesting to see the difference between 2018 and 2020 and actually 2021. And because many buyers in the market in 2020 found that the big problem, if that's the right way to put it, as well as finding a home, was that many of their closings were being delayed because of financing, not issues, but financing delays. Some issues around appraisals with COVID, but a lot of it was caused by the fact that mortgage interest rates have declined to such a low level that an awful lot of existing homeowners were refinancing. So in 2020, we saw the refis and home sales competing for the same resources, basically. The same people who were working, mortgage companies working from home. So that's what one of the reasons that we saw those the delays in the financing process was because mortgage interest rates just got to such a low level. And by the look of it, will remain at that low level. So one reason I thought this is interesting is that 2018 it was 4.5. Now it's 3. It's quite a big drop.
Oh yeah.
And it looks set to continue, given that if you think about the kind of the big picture, we haven't really seen the economic impact of COVID really kind of sort itself out yet, or really be felt fully in the market. And I think that's why the interest rates are going to remain low throughout 2021. That's the prediction anyway, not mine. It's an average of 3 or 4 financial institutions. That's where that number came from. We talked about sale price to list price ratio, that it was around about 99 point something percent.
100.
Yeah, 99.7 I think it was. But what's really interesting is to look at the distribution of those.
And I want to talk about this for a
I thought
second.
you might. I thought you might.
Just why I
All
was getting
yours.
my...
I knew you were waiting. We were waiting to talk, Danny. All yours.
Well, it's interesting to know because, our youngest son and his fiance have just moved over from LA. I know that's sort of no relevance or whatever, but they're looking to whether they buy a home or whether they rent a home, things like this. We were been talking to them about what's happening in the market, what's going on, all of this type of thing. And part of the discussion that we talk about is, we have competing offers. We do a whole lot to ensure that we get competing offers on homes. And in fact, our average sale price to list price ratio in 2020, the average was 99.7, ours is 103. And when I was talking to them about this, they were sort of saying, oh, well, we can't even look in Lexington now. We can't because, we're only going to have a certain budget. We can't go, et cetera, et cetera. And then I showed them this graph and I said, yeah, but look at this. Even though competing offers are part of what we do all the time, it's not the way it's there's 49% of the homes that sold last year sold for under the asking price. So homes come on the market overpriced, they're not prepared, they're not marketed, they're not staged. All of those things factor in as to whether you're going to get competition on the home. So even though the Lexington market, you're hearing here, it's buoyant, it's really strong, everything like this, look at that. 49% of the homes that came on the market sold for under the asking price. And I'd hate to look at that poor seller who looks like they got 77% of the asking price. Wouldn't you much prefer to be one of the sellers who got 124% of the asking price? There's so much involved in this, but don't just assume if you're thinking about coming on the market or thinking about how much your home would sell for, don't just assume that there's going to be competing offers on your home, because 49% of the sellers who sold in 2020 didn't have competing offers on the home. So I think that's sort of a bit of a sanity point. Well, sanity point, no, it's reality. You've got to price realistically. You've got to prepare your home. It's got to be marketed, and you've got to get it exposed to all the buyers that are out there. But that's what we talk about in our masterclass, so I'm not going to talk about that now.
Okay.
Yep.
You can talk about more information.
Okay. Oh, it's my turn.
There you go.
So, as I was sort of saying before, you may be looking in a different town to buy, or you might have a home to sell, another home to sell, or the home that you're talking about in another town, and you sort of think, well, okay, that's great, you're telling me about Lexington, but I need to know about something else. I wanted to show you where you can go and get more information. So this is our website, MA Properties. Oh, I should click. Oh, no. Too late. MAproperties.com. We have about 50 plus towns that we've got data for. And the way you find it is going down, and you can find out whether we've got the information, either by going to real estate statistics. But just to show you from this perspective, if we go to other towns and we go to community information, all of the homes that are shown in pink here.
All
Sorry?
the towns.
What did I say?
Homes.
Oh, all of the towns that are shown in pink
homes.
here are towns that we have statistics for. So really, most of the towns around we have statistics for. We can tell you what's going on in the town. I mean, we need to probably fill out Wilmington and Tewkesbury.
That's it. Yep.
We probably need to do that, but we've got information on everywhere else. So how do you go and find that information about those towns? You scroll down again and you go to real estate statistics, and down here you'll see we have inventory levels, absorption rates, sales price distribution. We have total sales. You've seen many of those in what Marcus has shown you so far. We also have the sale price to list price ratio for the last 13 months in most of the towns around. Price per square foot bands. What is the expected price per square foot? If you're looking at a home and you think, wow, this feels really expensive. Well, what's the average in the town and what's the high point that's been paid in the town for the last 12 months? You've got your average prices, your average home price trends, your median home prices. You've got an area here where you can go and get a whole array of those graphs in one sort of subset, if you like. The price to volume comparison, town market activity. You might want to know, let's say you're thinking about buying in Groton. Well, when do homes come on the market in Groton? When do they come on? When do they get listed? Which months? If I'm a buyer, would I be best looking? That's going to tell you.
Or a seller.
Or a seller, absolutely. Yeah. Past sales, new construction, current inventory. Past sales, I like to take people into past sales because that will give them an idea of what's happening in the town without even setting foot in the town yet. So if we're working with someone that's from out of town, I take them in here, and let's say we're going to pick a town like Burlington to our northern border, and we'll look at single family. We'll do a time range of 6 months, and we'll do a price range. Let's say 6 to 800K. And we hit some. That's going to be a busy price range, but that's okay. So this is a map of Burlington with icons of homes that have sold. Now, the ones that are in blue are homes that have sold. The ones in green are under agreement. So we might want to pick this one. Say, okay, all right, Cresthaven came on the market at $689, sold for $745, 108% sale price to list price ratio. Here's the information about the home. That's great. But here's some more information which is really key to understanding what's happening. Because we might sort of say that town has 101% average sale price to list price ratio. But is that in the price range that you're looking at? Because that 101 is across all of the homes that are sold. Here you can go in and have a look at the actual homes in those price ranges in a given time period and see, well, what's happening there? And if we look at this one came on at 600 and sold for 587, so it didn't have competing offers. This one came on at 525, sold for 600, competing offers. 569, 601, competing offers. 619 to 605, didn't have competing offers. 599 to 617, 619 to 619, 592. So before you've even set foot in the town, you know that, these homes possibly have competing offers in them. Let's see about a little higher price in that. So 779, 826, 779, 825. So yes, this whole price range looks like it has competing offers on the area. So that's useful for finding out with the town that you're interested in, what's happening with it. Now, if you have a look at inventory levels, what's having a look? Let's talk about Acton. We have a home coming on the market in Acton next week. Acton, do you remember Marcus saying, and before we do that, this is going from 2006 to 2020. the graph that you saw before in the market review was from, I believe, 2011. So this we've got further information back, but you can see this is part of that mortgage meltdown, the big problem that we had. Now we saw in Lexington, the change happened between 2012 and 2013. When did it happen here? Well, 2012 and 2013, still fairly high, but look at the dramatic change between 2013 and 2014. So it was a year later out in Acton. So it's the further you go out, the slower a recovery takes, but it's also the quicker it goes into a downturn than the closer in towns.
Fast in,
Yeah.
slow out.
Yeah. So here you've got lots of excess inventory happening in 2019.
But actually, before you one step further, 2020 saw a reduction in inventory. Thinking about what you talked about previously about people looking for larger homes, guess what? You know, if you're on a $600,000-700,000 budget, Acton might be the place to go to give you that 3,000 square foot home. You can't buy a 3,000 square foot home in Lexington for $600,000-700,000. You possibly can in Acton, and so we've seen people thinking commute's not that important anymore. But what I really the priority for me is a much larger home, and that's why Acton saw a reduction in inventory levels and an increase in sales, for example.
Yeah. So you can glean exactly what's going on with the town from the how many homes available perspective. When you look at the sales price distribution, you might sort of think, well, I've got 500K, 600K to spend. Can I buy in Acton at that price point? Let's have a look.
Yes.
Oh, so yeah, you've got, sorry, I was changing the other screen. I didn't mean to. So the 400 to 500K, yeah, you could probably buy in Acton at that price point. What about Winchester? Maybe you're looking at Winchester. Can you buy in that price point in Winchester? No.
Not so much.
So this is useful to identify and to write off some towns, if you like, based on the sales price distribution.
I always describe it, you can include towns. For example, if you've got $700,000 to spend, Winchester doesn't look like a good fit, Acton probably is. On the other hand, if you've got 1.5 million to spend, Winchester is a good fit, Acton probably isn't.
That's exactly right.
So you look at your price point, and if you really have only got 700,000 to spend, if you're interested in Winchester, you're probably going to have to broaden that search to Lexington as well, because you need to combine two towns in order to get enough homes for you basically to be successul. The reality is to be successful.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So that's the sale price distribution. I always take people to the average home prices as well. Now, you saw in Lexington, we had an upward. Let's have a look at Winchester. Since we were talking about Acton and Winchester before, let's have a look at what Winchester's showing. So it's showing we have a good appreciation, a good increase in average sale prices.
Except
2019,
the weakness in 2019 affected Winchester far more than it did. For example, I compare us when next town over. It affected Winchester far more than it did Lexington. They've also not seen that large increase over 2019, but almost no increase over 2018 over prices in 2018, which is kind of interesting.
But where I was really wanting to go and show you here, you can see what the profile is of
certainly
home prices appreciating.
Upwards, right, to 20.
And look at Acton. So Acton is, the further out you go, the more you're a little bit more challenged with, you've got to buy well, and it's in the doldrums just a little bit longer because of the proximity, the commute distance to Boston.
And the way you described it is the right thing. You need to be much more cautious, much more careful, perhaps the right way to put it, in buying in a weaker town than you do a stronger town. You can get away with a little bit more in a Lexington versus what you can in an Acton. I think.
And when we say Acton, being a weaker town, it's got a great school system. You can buy a whole lot of home for your money in Acton, but the commute's not fantastic. Have a look at Maynard, for instance.
See how
Let's
that
see
changes.
what Maynard,
Be
because
interesting to see how Acton
doesn't.
changes over the next few years.
Yeah, because Maynard, for instance, doesn't have a good school system. Let's see what it's. Yeah, but look at where it is. It went down for a lot longer, and it's only just over there. So, again, you can tell a whole lot about a town just based on the statistics of it. And I'm probably, one more. Let's say you want to buy in Acton and single families. When do homes come on the market in Acton? So by doing this, you can see, okay, in Acton, although I do have to throw in the caveat here, this is in a normal year. We can see the information. Last year was anything but normal. What we typically see is April, May and June being the biggest amounts of homes coming on the market. With COVID, it completely messed it all up.
April, May, June.
So,
anyway. Yep.
So don't be too concerned about that from this perspective, but it normally is a useful metric to show.
Yeah, almost needs to show 24 months instead of 14.
Yeah, I think maybe that would be a good idea to change that graph to throw that in.
Given what we're saying.
Anyway, so that's where I wanted to show you where you can get more information about other towns, and we can give you some. I went through it really, really quickly, but I talk people through this all the time, especially if they're coming from out of town. They don't know the areas here, and they tell me what they're looking at, what their price point is, all of this type of thing, and I go through the school systems, all of these types of things as well. But that's where you can get more information.
Back to the presentation.
Yes, are we back at the presentation?
We are.
Oh, okay. Predictions, that's you.
That's me. Okay, crystal ball. Oh, brave. I am brave. What the hell?
No, I know what's going to happen.
So let's think about 2021. What do we anticipate happening in 2021? And let's think about it from, I guess, three perspectives. The first one is the economy. Clearly, Lexington has fared very well in terms of 2020. And when you think about the average income in Lexington, it's not been that badly affected, I'm generalizing here, than, for example, perhaps a town where the average income was much lower. So Lexington, just because of the sheer, the historical of how we got where we are today, has set Lexington up very well for coming out of where we are right now. Clearly, we're going to come out of COVID. We have a new administration today. There's a lot happening in a positive sense moving forward. So it can only look positive in terms of the economy, specifically in terms of Lexington, even though it may take us a while to kind of fully get back to where we were previously. In fact, it is going to take a while. We've been less impacted than, for example, other towns as well. So that's the economy side. So in terms of the sellers, we saw a large increase in the number of sellers as sellers decided, you know what, house prices, yes, I like the appreciation I got, but now's the time to move on, to downsize, for example. I see no reason why that will change. We've had this pent-up demand to move for a while now. Since 2015, listings have declined. And so that, in my opinion, will continue into 2021. So we will see an increase, perhaps the same as 2020, number of sellers in the market. So that's the first thing. So sellers, good picture for the amount of supply we'll see in the market. In terms of the buyers, as Danny mentioned previously, buyers are still out. There were a lot of buyers in the market in late 2020, many of them clearly unsuccessful. So why would they not be in the market moving forward in 2021? So in my opinion, they will be in the market in 2021. So the picture for 2021, similar to what we saw in 2020.
Because nothing's really changed. Nothing's really changed from the end of 2020 to now, apart from the new administration. But until we get into sort of late summerish time frame, we're all, and maybe we can all get vaccinated, the market, it's still going to be something similar to last year.
So that's our predictions for 2021. Similar number of sellers in the market, so supply as we saw in 2020. Similar number of buyers in the market than we saw in 2022. So the picture looking very strong. And the difference will be the shape of the curves. We will not see any flattening in that mid-March to May timeframe. So we can anticipate, if anything, given what we've seen in terms of the weather, we'll see what happens in February. It looks like the spring market, if you will be starting earlier than it did in prior years. Normally it kicks out second half of February, perhaps into March, weather dependent, of course. But it looks like that will begin to happen earlier than we've seen previously. So we're planning on bringing homes on the market. Here we are on the 20th. So tomorrow we're bringing a home on the market. So ordinarily that's probably a month earlier than we would normally do it. And so that, I think, may be a shift we see in 2021 versus 2020, is that the market will be active earlier than we would ordinarily see. So forget 2020, earlier than we would ordinarily see, which would be in the spring. It looks like now, depending on what happens with the snow in February, that it may well kick off a little bit earlier, but we'll see.
And I don't know whether I'm just a little bit pessimistic. I don't know. I just worry that the later we get in the year, the end of summer, beginning of fall, and things are starting to get back to normal, the need for buyers to move from a smaller home into a bigger home, or the need for them to even move at all, because now they're going to be going back to work fairly soon. We don't know what the new normal is going to look like, but my concern is the later we get into the year, maybe the buyer demand drops a little bit more. So
I'm not sure I take your somewhat pessimistic, not pessimistic, but I think back to normal is not 2021. I think the requirement, a lot of what we talked about is this requirement to live in a larger home. Clearly the children will be back in school, that's for sure. But whether people still have to commute into Boston 5 days a week, maybe they go in 2 days a week, maybe they go in 3 days a week. I think that the desire for a larger home will continue certainly through 2021 and perhaps even longer. Now, we'll see what happens longer term, but I think I can only look as 2021. Yeah. But I think will be the shape of the listing curve, for example, listings per month, will get much closer to what we had previously. So I think it will slow down at the end of the year because it ordinarily does. So ignore that distribution of listings will change back to what we saw in 2018 and 2019, not what we saw in 2020.
It's going to be an interesting year. I mean, last year was one for the history books. It'll be interesting to see what happens this year. But on to the next topic, our stats. So what are our stats? Do we know what we're talking about? Yeah, hopefully. We still have some debating. I mean, obviously, we're only 20 days into 2021 and we're still sort of early stages yet. Right. But our stats for 2020, we listed and sold 65 homes last year. We also helped buyers buy 49 homes. So we had it's 114. Sorry, that's doing the math on the fly. Which should be easy, but it's been a long night. It's a long night. But what's a metric that I mentioned before was for those 65 homes that we bought on the market, our average sale price to list price ratio was 103. Now, in Lexington, the average is 100, and that's across a whole lot of people bringing homes on the market. 65 homes, an average sale price of 103. I'm pretty pleased with that, with last year and the uncertainty of last year and that type of thing. Our average days on the market did go up from the prior year. Our average days on the market were 28. Yeah, some of those were more expensive homes sitting on the market for longer. Some of that was, during the uncertainty in the March, April, and May timeframe. But it's going to come down.
Average for the market is
next
41.
year.
So.
Oh, okay, there you go. Average for the market was 41. We were 28. It's still more than we had last year. We're going to get that down this year. But so why have we sort of gone through all of this with you? This is sort of important because, we think that our clients deserve to be the smartest people at the closing table. And, we all benefit by becoming smarter about home buying and selling. So this is part of, one of our core values, education, not sales. It's really important that you know what's going on with the market just as well as we do, so that you can make smart decisions, smart moves made here. So anyway, on that note, thank you for joining us. We appreciate you spending your an hour. We're going to go and have dinner now. And look, it's been lovely, and let's hope 2021 is a better year than 2020. And
and if you have any questions,
you can contact us. But
there's clearly.
Oh, and if you in Lexington, you'll get one of these physical copies of these books in the mail, probably late January.
Early Feb probably.
Early Feb, yeah. But it will come in the mail, and you can open it up and say, I know all that.
All right, so with that, thank you for everything, and say any questions, please reach out to us. Bye.
Bye.